Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vet Scholar. Today, we're diving into one of the most vital systems in the body, the cardiovascular system. This is part one of our series on veterinary anatomy and physiology, and we're focusing on the heart and the cardiovascular system. Whether you're a vet student, a practicing vet, or just interested in how these complex systems work, this video is for you. So what does the cardiovascular system do, apart from keeping the blood flowing? The list is long, but here are the most important functions. 1. Oxygen transport. It carries oxygen from the lungs to the tissues where it's needed. 2. Carbon dioxide removal. It takes CO2 back to the lungs so we can exhale it. 3. Nutrient delivery. It transports nutrients from the digestive system to the tissues. 4. Waste removal. It takes waste products to organs like the kidneys for excretion. 5. Hormone transport. Hormones move from glands to target organs, coordinating various functions. 6. Temperature regulation. It helps dissipate heat, keeping the body's temperature in check. 7. Infection defense. It transports white blood cells and antibodies to fight infections. 8. Homeostasis. It stabilizes things like pH, ion levels, and fluid volumes in the body. In order for blood to perform its functions, it needs to move quickly through the body. But rapid flow can only happen with pressure differences, and this is where the heart comes into play. The heart is essentially a hollow muscle that contracts at regular intervals to create those pressure differences. Believe it or not, the heart starts beating when a fetus is just a few millimeters long. This gives us an idea of how essential the heart is, especially for animals that reach a certain size. Now let's talk location. The heart is found in the thoracic cavity, basically your chest, right between the two lungs. It has a cone-like shape with a broad base at the top and a pointed tip, or apex, that points downward and slightly to the left. Here's an interesting fact. All the large blood vessels enter and exit the heart at its base. Both the pulmonary and systemic circulations, the systems that get blood to your lungs and the rest of your body, start and end at the heart. And because blood needs to go through the lungs first to pick up oxygen before it hits the systemic circulation, by the time it reaches your organs, it's always oxygen-rich. This is a huge advantage. The heart is divided into two main parts, and this is super important. Why? It prevents oxygen-rich blood from mixing with oxygen-poor blood. One half of the heart handles blood that's been oxygenated by the lungs, while the other half deals with blood coming back from the body's tissues, which is low in oxygen. But another key reason for this division is pressure. The pulmonary circulation, which sends blood to the lungs, operates at a much lower pressure than the systemic circulation, which sends blood to the rest of the body. Why does this matter? Well, lower pressure in the pulmonary circuit reduces the risk of fluid building up in the lungs, something called pulmonary edema, and it also cuts down on how hard the heart has to work overall. So the heart doesn't sit alone in the chest. It's actually wrapped in a protective sac called the pericardium. Now, the pericardium is made up of two layers, the visceral and parietal layers. Between these two layers is a fluid-filled space called the pericardial cavity. You can think of the heart and pericardium like a fist pushed into the middle of a balloon. The heart is the fist, and the balloon is the pericardium. Importantly, the heart itself isn't actually inside the pericardial cavity, it's just surrounded by it. The fluid in this space keeps everything lubricated, so there's minimal resistance to the heart's movements as it contracts and relaxes. The inner visceral layer of the pericardium is directly attached to the outer wall of the heart, while the outer parietal layer is more rigid. It's reinforced by connective tissue and attaches to both the diaphragm and the large blood vessels near the heart. This connective tissue prevents the heart from overstretching, which is important for maintaining heart function. Here's where things get interesting. If the heart starts to enlarge, whether from hypertrophy, where the heart muscle gets thicker, or from dilation, where the heart chambers expand, the pericardium stretches with it. But this stretching is gradual, and if it happens too quickly, that connective tissue layer can't always keep up. However, The pericardium's two smooth, lubricated layers minimize any resistance to the heart's movement, making it an efficient system for the heart to beat without friction. The heart doesn't just pump blood, it ensures that blood moves efficiently in one direction, and it's able to do this because of the cardiac valves. These valves, made from fibrous connective tissue, are essentially gates that open and close at the right moments to guide blood through the heart. But they aren't just floating there. These valves are attached to a key structure called the annulus fibrosus. This is a disc made of fibrous connective tissue that anchors not only the valves, but also the cardiac muscles, the pulmonary artery, and the aorta. Here's a quick breakdown of how the heart's anatomy fits together. The muscles of the atria, the upper chambers of the heart, are anchored to the upper surface of the annulus fibrosus. The muscles of the ventricles, the lower chambers, are attached to the lower surface. Now, the heart has 4 interconnected rings that make up the annulus fibrosus, each corresponding to a key opening. 2 of these rings connect the atria to the ventricles, forming the atrioventricular valves, AV valves. The other 2 rings are where the ventricles meet the major arteries, the pulmonary artery and the aorta. These form the semilunar valves. Let's focus on the AV valves first. The left AV valve is known as the mitral valve, or the bicuspid valve, because it has 2 cusps. Meanwhile, the right AV valve is called the tricuspid valve, and you guessed it, it has 3 cusps. These valves are designed to ensure blood flows from the atria into the ventricles, but not the other way around. This is critical for maintaining efficient blood flow through the heart. Now, there's an additional structure involved with the AV valves, the tendinous cords, also called chordae tendineae. These are thin cords of connective tissue attached to the free ends of the AV valve cusps. The other end of these cords is anchored to papillary muscles, which stick out from the ventricular muscle. Why is this important? Well, when the ventricles contract, the tendinous cords and papillary muscles prevent the AV valves from inverting, which would allow blood to flow back into the atria. The opening and closing of the cardiac valves is actually a passive process, meaning it's driven entirely by pressure differences on either side of the valve. Here's how it works. When the pressure in the atria becomes higher than that in the ventricles, the AV valves open, allowing blood to flow from the atria to the ventricles. But once the ventricles contract, the pressure inside the ventricles skyrockets, becoming greater than that in the atria. This forces the AV valves to close as the cusps are pressed tightly together, preventing backflow. The papillary muscles and tendinous cords ensure that, even under high pressure, the valves remain stable and functional without inverting. Now let's shift to the semilunar valves. These valves are located where the right ventricle meets the pulmonary artery and where the left ventricle meets the aorta. Unlike the AV valves, the semilunar valves are composed of 3 pocket-like cusps shaped like half-moons, hence their name. They are designed to open and close in response to pressure changes between the ventricles and the major arteries. Here's how they work. When the ventricles contract, the pressure inside them becomes higher than the pressure in the arteries, which causes the semilunar valves to open, allowing blood to flow into the arteries. But once the ventricles relax, the pressure within them drops below that of the arteries. The semilunar valves close, preventing the backflow of blood into the ventricles. Because of their shape and stiffness, these valves don't need tendinous cords to stabilize them. They're naturally able to withstand the pressure changes during heart contraction. Interestingly, there are no valves between the atria and the large veins that bring blood back to the heart. So why doesn't blood flow backward into the veins? This is due to 2 key reasons. 1. When the atria contract, their openings toward the veins are compressed, which minimizes any potential backflow. 2. The pressures within the atria are typically low, so there's very little force driving blood back into the veins. The heart's wall isn't just a uniform muscle. It consists of 3 distinct layers, each with its own critical role in making sure the heart functions efficiently. From the inside out, the layers of the heart are 1. The endocardium, 2. The myocardium, 3. The epicardium. Each layer serves a specific purpose, working together to make sure blood moves efficiently through the body and that the heart is properly supported. Let's start by looking at the innermost layer. The endocardium is the layer that's in direct contact with the blood inside the heart chambers. Think of it as the heart's inner lining. The endocardium is made up of a single layer of squamous epithelial cells, which rest on a thin layer of connective tissue. These epithelial cells are smooth, which helps reduce resistance to blood flow as it moves through the heart. Importantly, the endocardium is continuous with the endothelium, the layer of cells that lines the blood vessels. This continuity is crucial for ensuring a smooth transition for blood as it moves from the heart into the blood vessels. The smooth surface of the endocardium also plays a role in preventing blood clots by minimizing turbulence inside the heart chambers. Next, we move to the myocardium, which is the thick, muscular middle layer of the cardiac wall. The myocardium is composed of cardiac muscle tissue, which is unique in its ability to contract continuously and rhythmically without tiring. This is the powerhouse of the heart, the layer that generates the force needed to pump blood throughout the body. The 2 halves of the heart are separated by a muscular wall known as the septum. This septum is crucial because it allows the heart to function as 2 separate pumps. One side of the heart sends blood to the lungs for oxygenation, while the other side pumps oxygen-rich blood out to the rest of the body. Even though the atria and ventricles are all muscle, their roles are different. The atria act mainly as reservoirs, temporarily holding blood until it's transferred to the ventricles. Then, the ventricles, which have thicker myocardium due to their more demanding role, contract to pump the blood out of the heart. Finally, we come to the epicardium, the outermost layer of the heart wall. The epicardium covers the surface of the myocardium and houses important structures like the coronary vessels, which supply blood to the heart muscle itself, and adipose tissue, fat, that provides cushioning and protection. The epicardium is actually identical to the inner, visceral layer of the pericardium, the sac that surrounds the heart. So, while the pericardium forms a protective covering for the heart, the epicardium is the part of that layer that directly adheres to the surface of the heart. This outer layer is vital because it helps protect the heart and reduces friction as the heart beats and moves within the chest cavity.